Now, it is just hours to the 17th extraordinary session of the East African Community Heads of State Summit set to kick off tomorrow, that is March 2nd, in Arusha, Tanzania. A lot of things on the agenda. Let's now bring in Ambassador David Kikaya, an expert on East African affairs. Sir, thank you for joining us. What is your take on the fact that the Burundi crisis is not expressly on the agenda of tomorrow's summit?
Can you please repeat that? It's not clear.
Mr. Ambassador, what is your take on the fact that the Burundi crisis is not part of the agenda for tomorrow's 17th session of the EAC Heads of State Summit?
I think that is predictable. Predictable in the sense that if they were to put it in, obviously there are controversial issues and views by member states. So I suppose the people who were grafting the agenda were careful to try and avoid any controversy, because already the heads of states have quite a packed agenda to deal with. Just one point. The second part of it is the fact that already there is a separate organ that is dealing with the issues of Burundi, as set in motion by the eminent persons from the African Union, but also as triggered by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. So I think it was advisable that they separate these two so they can focus on the more issues that perhaps are uniting them at this particular point in time.
Right, fair enough, Ambassador, but could it be that the East African Community Heads of State Summit does not want to make the hard decisions against Pierre Nkurunziza, the Burundian president?
I think that prompts another question is who has the high moral standard or pedestal to stand on to try and point a finger at Nkurunziza within the East African community? I'm sure you don't want us to open the debate along that line, but that obviously could be one of the arguments that are kind of like behind the scenes that, and as I said earlier, perhaps amongst the member heads of states are those who hold very different views from each other, and therefore it would be like opening a Pandora's box were you to start the summit with discussing Burundi. And you know, we could go into details of that if there was time, but definitely divergent views could have been a guiding principle to try and pour cold water on it. I'm very sure that during side meetings, the issue of Burundi will come in. For example, the issue of who contribute the forces that are supposed to go there, what kind of revenue is put forward. I'm sure that these kind of issues will inevitably, the observer mission, which countries bring the observer missions from and who at what level. So definitely Burundi will feature, but perhaps it's going to feature more inside meetings rather than in the major agenda item.
Right. So some of the other items that are said to be in tomorrow's meeting are some reports from the EAC ministers on the possible admission of South Sudan and Somalia into the East African community. What is your take on that, and what is the latest concerning the admission of those two states into the EAC?
First and foremost, I think the one for South Sudan is long overdue. In fact, South Sudan was supposed to have been admitted soon after the Machakos Accord, except for the fact that things fell apart, as Chinowat once told us, as soon as they went back to Juba. And you've seen that even subsequent attempts at peace and mediation between Sarakil and Riek Machar have, even as of now, fallen on rocky grounds. So yes, for South Sudan, it's just a question of putting their house in order, and the key is almost like handed to them. For Somalia, I'm not very sure. Until and unless there's some semblance of governance, there's some semblance of sovereignty in that particular country, I think it will be even unadvisable for the community to want to bring them on board wholeheartedly at this particular point in time. I would rather they hold on for a bit and trying to do what they possibly can do best to try and bring the house in order. But you and me know that that's going to be a very long shot, even in the long time to come.
Given the EAC's way of doing things, of what they have done so far, if indeed South Sudan is integrated into the East African community, what would be the role of the EAC in making sure that the impasse that is currently ongoing in South Sudan between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar is, there's a solution for that? Would South Sudan stand a better chance if they are in the East African community?
The birth of the state and nation of South Sudan, you could say, the matron was really East Africa, and that, for that matter, Kenya, as subsequently handed down by the UN, the African Union, IGAD member states, and then the East African community. So there is that yearning for South Sudan to be a member of the community, not only just for political reasons, but also for business reasons. The problem we are having in South Sudan is who do you deal with at this particular point in time that you could say commands even, 60% of the population's goodwill, and that is an issue that ought to be addressed. Secondly, South Sudan has quite a lot to offer when and if they do come on board. It is going to be a virgin market, both for investments and also even for marketing our both services and the goods. And therefore, the community would be very much looking forward to welcoming in South Sudan, except for putting the house in order. And just before I leave that point, I think the member heads of states in East Africa ought to do quite a lot of soul searching in terms of being partisan, either for or against any of the parties.